Flight attendants. What are the worst aspects of your job? We don't get paid during the boarding process, delays, or sit time in between flights. This is generally the case with all airlines. We also don't get paid for training, except for maybe a few airlines. If you're flying and you see a crew member sitting in a passenger seat, they're most likely commuting into work or going home. Please don't bother them. As a commuter myself, it's like having a second job and it's very exhausting. Speaking of exhaustion, we're all most likely overworked and completely drained from working on fumes. It can be a very tiring job and hard on your body. Flight attendants generally just meet when we start a trip, and we usually have new pilots on every leg. We have a very seniority-based career. Seniority is everything. On a more serious note, if someone starts acting up or is suspicious, we all know, and we will watch over you the entire flight to make sure things don't escalate. We usually see everything going on. The negative side of this job is that it can be a very lonely one. Most of my friends are flight attendants or either based elsewhere, or we just always end up on different trips. Or my 9-to-5 friends whom I hardly see because I work weekends a lot of times. It's not uncommon to go months or even a year without seeing some of my friends. Plus, being away from home so much doesn't help the loneliness. It's very hard on your body. Sometimes after finishing a trip, I'll still be dehydrated or bloated a day or two later. It also causes a lot of skin problems because the air is so dry on the plane. Being on reserve is the hardest part of the job. It's basically on call, sitting around, not knowing where you're going to go or when. Being a commuter, I'm sitting in a hotel waiting for crew scheduling to call me with something, but there's a chance I'll waste my time and money by staying at a base and getting a hotel and end up not flying at all. There's a lot of gossip and drama that comes with this job. I've worked on some trips where the FA working up front can't stand the FA working in the back. Days are long and can turn longer, and that messes with your sleep and eating habits. For example, day 3 of my 3 days. I woke up at 10 a.m., worked on a 2.5-hour flight scheduled for 1 p.m., had a 3-hour sit time at the connecting airport, got delayed by 2 hours because of weather delays. Boarding the plane takes minutes, was pushed back and the ramp closed, sat on the tarmac for an hour, and finally, got to our destination 2.5 hours after takeoff, but 3 hours behind schedule. I was too tired to drive home 2 hours away, so I got a hotel and now I just woke up at 1:30. Depending on whether we're domestic or international, our duty days can be legally pushed to 16.5 hours. That's 16.5 hours on a plane and in airports. It can drive you to your breaking point, and it's not uncommon to have 10 to 15-hour duty days every day of a trip. Actually, my total duty time for my last 3-day trip was 35 hours. We got paid for 16 hours. Also, a huge thing is that we legally have to tell you the seatbelt sign is on. If you don't and the FAA is on board, we personally get fined for not informing a passenger the seatbelt sign is on. That's not the only thing we can be fined for. Another example is that yesterday, a man asked me for headphones while taxiing. I told him I wouldn't be able to get them to him until after takeoff. That's because if I did bring him headphones while taxiing, I could be personally fined for doing something non-safety related while taxiing. Once that door closes and we're on the ground, we cannot do anything unless it's for safety. We also can't serve drinks on the ground once the door is closed, unless there's a long tarmac delay. Another thing we can be fined for is if our manuals are not up to date, and now most airlines have tablets for manuals and they have to be charged at least 90% at the beginning of the day. We're also required to carry certain items with us, and if we don't have them, we can get fined. So if you ask for something while taxiing and we say no, it's because we can get into big and expensive trouble. And the only reason we are up before takeoff is to do safety checks, aka seatbelts, seatbacks, and tray tables. After we land, we have already checked prior to landing, so we need to stay in our jump seats until the seatbelt sign is off unless there's an emergency. Story 2. USA flight attendant here. We are not paid our hourly rate during boarding or deplaning an aircraft, even when we sign to work. Usually, an airline will pay both their pilots and flight attendants their hourly rate when the brake releases from the gate until the aircraft reaches the next gate. This is due to the 1926 Railway Labor Act, which overlooks both railways and airlines to this day. It was last amended in 1936. They circumvent this by paying their employees a per diem, which is usually $1.50 to $3 per hour you're away from your starting airport or home, which we call base. Asking us to put up your bag is kind of a customer service taboo due to policies and procedures. Many customers with injuries, older customers, or some women will assume flight attendants, usually males, can put bags in the bin for them. But we are not allowed to do it by ourselves and ourselves alone. If we're hurting our shoulder or back due to the weight of the bag by putting it in the overhead bin, many airlines would not compensate their flight attendants for an OJI, on-the-job injury. So if you need to put up your bag but cannot do it yourself, as much as it may stink, unfortunately, you need to check it or you just look inconsiderate. Bathroom doors are usually accessible by pushing them where it reads push, right there at the signage. I know the airplane looks very foreign from everyday places, but do take heed of the signs to help you along your way. Speaking of using the bathroom, if the seatbelt sign is on and you need to go, the flight attendant cannot legally tell you yes, no, or a variant of just be careful. If the seatbelt sign is on, all we can say is the seatbelt sign is on. It may seem confusing or unhelpful, but this is due to legal reasons at the end of the day. When a flight attendant is standing at the boarding door and greeting people, we aren't just greeting people but also looking at and monitoring them for potential threatening behavior toward other passengers or able-bodied people in an emergency situation. All flight attendants are trained in self-defense. They relearn techniques each year too. Negative aspects of the job? We are constantly away from our home life for a living, usually 3 to 9 days at a time in some cases, so the job can be lonely, especially if the crew you're flying with doesn't mesh well together, and because I'm away from home, I cannot own a dog. Radiation from flying is real for both flight attendants and pilots. The potential to develop skin cancer is very real for us, so I hope to not fly as much when I become more senior to reduce the possibility of radiation exposure. But besides all the weird taboos and negatives, we love our job so much. In my 20s, I've seen some of the world on my airline's dime. Have a very flexible schedule and make a decent paycheck to live alone in a big US city. I do not think I want to solely fly for the rest of my life. However, I do want to always keep the job for the benefits and do something on the side to help support a great home life. Story 3. The lack of stability in my schedule is a huge thing that people don't really know about. I find out where I'm going for the month on the 21st of the month before. Unless I have booked leave there, I have no idea what my days off will be. In January, I turned up to work for a Nairobi trip and got reassigned to Chicago 20 minutes before I was due for my briefing. I arrived in ORD dressed for the African summer. As for things you don't know, almost always we pick our BFF or boyfriend for the flight who is simply the most attractive guy in the flight just for a bit of fun. We also discuss amongst us how nice outside is. On wide-body aircraft, there's 2 aisles and we work each side. Once we've done the initial drinks round, we often have a casual chat over what they're like. My side is pretty nice. They're drinking a lot of alcohol though. 340 is jerk. There's a family of 4 at the front who are lovely. If you drink too much and we cut you off when you ask for your 4th double vodka tonic in an hour, don't try to pull the wool over our eyes and ask someone else. We know about you. The onboard manager will know about you, and the captain will know about you. As soon as I cut someone off, I let the crew working with me know that I'd stopped giving 28B booze. When the manager calls us, every half an hour at my airline, we'll let them know that 28B has been cut off, and in turn, they'll let the captain know. It's nothing major, but I don't think a lot of people realize how much we keep the flight deck in the loop on everything that's going on. People in business and first class don't realize they're cracking off their warm-smelling bed farts all the time when they're trying to sleep, and it's disgusting. And yes, we know when you're getting handsy with each other. Story 4. My wife is a former flight attendant, so I'll offer a few things she's told me. When everyone stands near the gate waiting for their boarding group to call, you prevent other passengers from getting on board. Gate agents and flight attendants affectionately refer to this cloud as gate lice. Flight attendants have a level of authority in the flight that's below the captain, but they can and do make the call about whether you will fly or not. If you're too intoxicated, if you're belligerent, and if you give them the impression you will not follow their instructions in a flight, the FAs can kick you off. If you refuse to go, they can have you arrested. Likewise, in a flight, they can have you detained and arrested at the destination. Flight attendants' primary purpose is safety, not serving you food and drinks. That's just something extra to help justify their presence on board and add some comfort to the flight. So please don't mistake them for mall security. They have zero authority and are just a sky waiter or waitress. If you knew how little money they made, you'd rethink how you treated FAs and if you'd like to do that as a career. The hourly wage may seem nice, but they only get paid when the boarding door is closed. Otherwise, sitting at the airport waiting for a delayed flight, riding a shuttle to the hotel, or riding back for the next flight doesn't pay the hourly rate. When you add up all the time you're essentially away from home or not in a hotel room, the hourly wage drops to below the minimum wage. Some airlines give better pay based on seniority, but most airlines do not. The only real perks are flight benefits. FA plus spouse or significant other gets flight benefits, meaning they can fly anywhere for just the government fee as a glorified standby. Story 5. That's quite the can of worms you open there. Drink plenty of water. A plane's atmosphere is very dehydrating. We're issued a 3-liter water bottle to drink per day. It may sound weird, but I started to not like the taste of plain water. We typically aren't paid during boarding and deplaning. We are obviously working, but our on-the-clock time for our hourly pay doesn't start until the big door closes. So get your stuff together and sit down in a timely manner, please. Unexpected turbulence is a real thing, so wear your seatbelt when seated, as you can hurt yourself if you hit the ceiling. Don't let your kids run wild. 8-hour layovers for us means about 4 hours of sleep if you're lucky. Layover time starts when the big door opens for deplaning and stops at the time you're supposed to be checked in to start boarding. You have to account for shuttle time in both directions, getting ready, etc. Not all layovers are that short, but there's at least 1 to 3 times it happens per trip. It's seniority-based, so if you're at the bottom of the totem pole, you're going to be on call for at least a few years. Being on call means a minimum of a 2-hour deadline to get the call to get yourself to the airport through TSA and into the crew room for check-in. You can leave on a day trip and then have to call crew scheduling. We call them screw scheduling, to be released from duty. They can then send you on another trip so long as it doesn't exceed 6 days of flying in a row. Your work life is completely unpredictable during that time. You're looked down upon as a flight attendant if you date a pilot. A lot of them, but not all, are arrogant D-bags. I've been chased by a few to find out they're married, some with newborn kids. I get that it's a lonely life, but come on, don't be like that. Before anyone tries to say otherwise, the flight crew knows this is true. We've all been on trips with those guys more than we can count. I've seen a lot of pilots spank banks of their wives, girlfriends, and side girls. I've been hit on more times than I can count on flights. I'm not arrogant by any means, but guys will hit on you because of the fantasy. If you hit on an FA, they will see you as that guy and will likely never call you. It's like hitting on a bartender. A lot of us wear fake wedding rings because of this. I've had guys try to see up my skirt, which wasn't short, try to do a low goodbye wave, only to graze my chest on the way out. It's funny when guys hit on you early in the flight and then realize I'm stuck with you for the duration of it. That's plenty for now. Story 6. I went through something with American Airlines in a transcontinental flight to Honolulu. It was a living hell. As soon as the crew realized how sick I was, they avoided me and wouldn't answer any questions or even make eye contact. I was never rude, but I and my colleagues were basically begging for things like water or a blanket, but couldn't get them or even a response. They shunned the whole row for the entire flight. No exaggeration. By the time I got off, the people I was traveling with had to carry me, arms over their shoulders, and my fever was 104. I couldn't walk. A tiny bit of kindness, some water, and maybe if somebody had found me an Advil, I would not have been that sick. My friend later told me that they thought I would pass away, obviously not, and they were also worried they would catch it from being so close. 48 hours later, I was right as rain, although one other person then got sick in the hotel and with a doctor checking in. There was just some horrible bug I picked up, and of course, it decided to kick in after we took off. I don't like American Airlines much at all anymore, largely because of that incident. And while we're on the topic of flight attendants, if you enjoy hearing about their experiences, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more insider insights like these. Story 7. Hairspray can set off lavatory smoke alarms. Also, yes, your vape. Whenever I take a flight as a passenger out of uniform, I always greet the flight attendants in the front and usually the pilots and let them know I'm a flight attendant. It's not industry standard, but the idea is to let them know where my seat is in case there's an emergency and I'm an extra set of helpful hands. Junior flight attendants are exhausted, like zombies walking around facing minor hypoxia, sleep deprivation, negative bank accounts, and general anxiety. That was me during our airline's required reserve period. It's comparable to new RNs and doctors who are on call. You can be on call for 24 hours, which means at any point, you have 2 hours to be at the airport in uniform, ready to fly any flight they assign you. Once you finish that assignment, which can be anywhere from 2 hours to 4 days, you have 9 hours of rest before you go back on call. Every flight attendant has a base, but not every airport is a base. Many flight attendants are therefore commuters. For example, you can live in Ohio, but you're a new hire who was assigned SFO as your base. You can move to the most expensive city in the country or commute before your assignments from the Midwest to SFO every time. Many flight attendants and pilots mitigate this logistic by staying in crash pads a few nights a month. Apartments under one name of the lease, but with bunk beds and shared spaces and dividend rent. Salary and union representation are interesting topics as well. Most of us love our jobs. Story 8. Leave the bathroom the way you found it. I kid you not when I say that a passenger left his giant turd on the floor of the lavatory. Not sure how. I'm not sure why. But it was definitely my first code brown. We can tell when your emotional support animal is real and when you just manipulated the system to avoid paying the cabin pet fee. Don't make small talk with us. We hear the same questions every day. What's your route? And is this your first flight? I'm here to give you food, drinks, and clear instructions on how to get out if the plane is on fire. I'm not here to provide you with small talk. Get a book. Perhaps this is the most important one. Most airports right now are landing too many planes an hour, so if we have to wait for a gate or if there's a traffic jam on the tarmac, do not, I repeat, do not ask us to call the flight deck and tell them to hold your connecting flight. That's not how it works in America. You're not special and your flight will never be held for you unless you have George Clooney status. During the holiday season, make sure your connection time is at least 90 minutes minimum. Weather, maintenance, and air traffic control delays are all factors that will stop you from having a seamless experience. Plan ahead. Story 9. The chimes and dings you hear from the speaker all have a very specific meaning. A single high chime is a passenger call button going off. A high then low chime is a call on the interphone from another crew member. And a double low chime indicates the plane is above or below 10,000 feet. Indicators for final descendants for landings, aka strap in and clean up. Some negative aspects, depending on the type of person you are, loneliness. It has never particularly bothered me. I've always enjoyed the solace, and I don't mind going around the city on my own. But right now, for the first time in years, it's getting to me. I'm going through a breakup as of today while I'm in the middle of a trip, and it's so hard to try to keep yourself composed in hours-long flights while locking yourself in and out of the bathroom to wipe your tears up, make yourself look presentable, and keep a smile. It's worse when you get to the hotel room at the end of the day and you're alone, thousands of miles away from any friends or family, and you cry into your pillow, aching to hug the person who's leaving you. I want to be at home. Story 10. Safety, security, and lastly, service. Those are the three things we're here for, and they're prioritized in that very order. I love my job as an FA. I've been doing it for over 7 years, and there's so much flexibility with the job that you can't compare it to any other career. I could work as little or as much as I'd like to, and for the most part, I could choose the routes that I fly. Passengers could sometimes be difficult, but the best part about this job is that I'll probably never see that passenger again after that one flight. And once I walk off the airplane and head home, I've left my work behind me and don't have to think about it again until my next trip. That being said, the negative aspect of my job has to be the long hours and sometimes very early showtimes. A lot of my friends think the job is glamorous and a vacation all the time, but you don't really wake up at 3 a.m. every day when you go on vacation. Oh yeah, and the absolute worst thing is pouring Diet Coke on the airplane because it fizzes much longer than any other carbonated drink for some weird reason. Thanks for tuning in to hear about the worst aspects of being an FA. If you'd like to know more about what happens at 30,000 feet, then watch What's the Most What the F thing you've experienced during a flight. Story 2 is weirdly entertaining. See you there.